I'd like to start with a quote from writer and activist Adrienne Marie Brown that captures the meaning of the race for justice of the peace in Precinct 1. How we are at the small scale is how we are at the large scale. This quote is elucidative of the ripple effect local politics can have for working class families. Justice of the Peace Precinct 1, or JP1, covers the northeast part of Travis County, along with parts of East Austin, north of 7th Street. It's one of the 5 justice courts in Travis County. Voters only vote for their respective Justice of the Peace precinct, just like their state or federal representative. Notably, this is not to be confused with the county commissioner precinct. County commissioners are the policymaking and administrative branch of county government, and there are only 4 precincts with 1 county-wide seat called the county judge. The justice courts are the one place where working class people are most likely to experience the legal system. This court is responsible for evictions cases, civil cases less than $20,000, fine-only criminal offenses, and truancy cases. These courts hear thousands of cases a year. It's thousands of hours of time off for families. It's thousands of hours of stress for individuals navigating the legal system for the first time. And it's your friends and neighbors that will be directly impacted by a court where in the 2022 primary, only 15,549 ballots were cast in a precinct with over 100,000 registered voters. And in 2026, there's an opportunity for a local office to actually reflect our values. Andrew Hairston, DSA member, DSA endorsed, is running for Justice of the Peace Precinct 1 because no one is disposable. Before diving into the Andrew Hairston campaign for Justice of the Peace Precinct 1, let me explain what a Justice of the Peace Court is, what it does, and what it means. To give some background on the impact this court has on working people, let us dive into the number of cases this court handles. In Texas, we have a total of 796 justice courts, 5 of which are here in Travis County. A county in Texas can have anywhere from 1 to 8 Justice of the Peace precincts, depending on the population size. For example, the largest county in Texas by population, Harris County, has 8 precincts and 2 courts in each precinct for a total of 16 courts. At the end of 2024, Texas had 3.7 million active pending cases in the justice courts. Around 2.1 million cases were filed in 2024, and of those, 57% were traffic-related misdemeanors and 34% were civil cases. By the end of 2024, Travis County's Justice of the Peace in Precinct 1 had 29,608 active pending cases. That same year, 15,316 brand new cases were filed. 54% were traffic-related misdemeanors, and 43% were civil cases. In comparison, Precinct 2, the precinct going from southwest Travis County to Pflugerville and along the Williamson County lines, had the most new filed cases for Travis County at 22,420 cases. That is 7,000 more new filed cases than Precinct 1. Now, what exactly comes from all this paperwork? Let's highlight some of the key responsibilities of these courts. Landlord-tenant cases are handled by Justice of the Peace courts. These judges are the ones that can grant an eviction, a decision that can have severe consequences for renters. Precinct 1 saw 3,525 landlord-tenant cases filed. That accounts for 23% of all of the cases filed for Precinct 1 in 2024. Compared to Precinct 2, which had 7,000 more cases filed, only 18% of their new cases filed were landlord-tenant cases. Additionally, these courts have jurisdiction over truancy cases. Truancy cases refer to civil cases brought forward by a school district due to a student missing an excess number of school days. It's another piece of the school-to-prison pipeline. In 2024, Precinct 1 saw 125 truancy cases filed. 106 of these cases were against the parents due to their child being below the age of 12. 19 were filed against the student for being above the age of 12. In these cases, the court can decide to provide interventions, community service, or simply fine the students and parents. These courts are politicized in such a way that directly impacts working families. Take, for example, the 16 peace courts in Harris County. Harris County has a population of 5 million people. However, according to the Houston Chronicle, 4 of them handle more than half of the county's civil cases. Unquote. It makes sense to have more courts to equally cover all parts of the county. The Houston Chronicle highlights how the increased caseload for constituents means the courts have less time in other areas, such as providing legal aid for tenants. The Justice of the Peace courts make life-impacting decisions for everyday folks. They can decide to evict a tenant, criminalize a student, or decide if a traffic misdemeanor will be resolved through community service, education, or financial punishment. These courts have a real-world impact on you and your neighbors, and who sits on that bench will make an impact for the residents living in Precinct 1. The Hairston campaign message for JP1 is simple. No one is disposable. With the powers given to the justice courts, Andrew Hairston can fight for students, tenants, and working families. Take, for example, the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline describes a system in which our schools criminalize our Black and brown students through menial or otherwise inconsequential laws with consequences that don't match the crime. Let's take laws regarding students with vapes in schools. In 2023, the state of Texas passed a bill that forced any student caught with a vape in school to be sent to a Disciplinary Alternative Education Program, or DAEP. No warning or second chances if caught for the first time. Additionally, it doesn't matter if you were vaping in the school or if it was even yours. If you had a vape, you were removed from your school. The accumulation of a disciplinary record at such an early age, along with the total upheaval of a student's day-to-day life, has ramifications that last longer than any real harm done by consuming or possessing a vape in school. The answer to a child making a mistake is not to punish them, but to support them. It's to show that when you make a mistake, you'll be met with empathy and community instead of being seen as a criminal. The peace courts can play a role in perpetuating the system or making the necessary changes to improve it. A court can provide resources, support, or a second chance for parents and our young students. Or a court can continue the school-to-prison pipeline. A particular area where these courts can make a difference are with truancy cases, and the Hairston campaign has a vision to address unexcused absences. Andrew Hairston is advocating for investing in juvenile case managers. These juvenile case managers can make visits to the home, check weekly progress, and intervene the moment a new absence occurs. This team of JCMs can support not only the student, but the systems around them, such as connecting them with transportation, mental health resources, and connecting families with resources. Andrew Hairston will provide support and resources, not fines and punishment, to students and parents. Additionally, Hairston's platform wants to keep families in their homes. Austinites are struggling with increasing costs and a lack of resources, and a justice court can ensure that landlords follow the letter of the law to come to a conclusion that supports all parties. Precinct 1 saw the second highest number of landlord-tenant cases filed in 2024. In 2025, Precinct 1 saw an 11% increase in landlord-tenant cases filed, going from 3,525 to 3,914 cases filed. By the end of last year, Precinct 1 had a total of 5,378 landlord-tenant cases on docket, the most out of the 5 courts. An increase in caseload means less time for the constituents of the court. Remember, these courts are sometimes the first interaction working families have with the legal system. On the other hand, a majority of apartments are corporate-owned. This means on the opposite side of the working family fighting to stay in their home are landlords with the adequate resources to work against them. Since corporate landlords in these cases are also legally required to follow the laws in the book, the right judge on that bench has the power to adequately enforce those laws. Judge Hairston understands the barriers that tenants will face when walking into that court. He proposes including kiosks with eviction procedural checklists and contact info for local nonprofits to support tenants without representation. A court has the responsibility to build a relationship with local organizations and government offices. These relationships can support families and provide a solution to their eviction case. On his website, Hairston makes this commitment, quote, "As your JP, I'll use every tool in the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure to ensure that the People's Court actually works for the people, providing a fair, balanced, and compassionate process for every resident." It's important to understand what this race means for working-class families. JP1 has a constituency of over 300,000 residents, and we have the opportunity to represent them in the People's Court by a judge with the right values. Now, imagine having a DSA candidate run for every JP court in Travis County, representing 1.3 million residents. It will mean hundreds of thousands of constituents having their first interaction with the legal system be with a socialist. The race for JP1 is one of the many building blocks to build a future that works in favor of working-class families. It's a step towards progress for the city of Austin, and it shows our community and neighbors that we are showing up on every level. This one precinct-level court can make life-changing decisions for everyday folks, and we want to make sure our comrade Andrew Hairston is the one making those decisions. So now let's hear from Andrew himself about how he plans to serve the people of Precinct 1 with compassion, dignity, and integrity. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew.
Marissa, dear comrade, I am so honored and happy to be here with you.
Amazing. Let's, get started with the basics. Could you give us a bit of a rundown of your experience prior to running for Justice of the Peace in this election?
Yeah, for sure. So I first ran in 2022. I came into my socialist organizing in 2021 and joined Austin DSA that year. And before my official connection with the chapter, a comrade, Mike, who had met me during some advocacy against the death penalty and for the liberation of Rodney Reed in 2019, soon after I moved to Austin, told me about this seat. He had been doing some research. He's a very savvy political organizer and recognized that the now retiring judge received some bad press in a major news outlet nationally, and we were contemplating, like, should we put up a socialist candidate for this seat? Also, back in 2022, it was rumored that Judge Williams was going to retire then. And so if that was going to be the perfect convergence, right? Bad press, a retirement, and an open socialist running, that felt like a perfect trifecta. But of course, as soon as I reached out, she said, "Oh no, I decided to go for one more term." But at that point, we had built the infrastructure and we were like, let's go for it. Ran an amazing 4 month campaign. She got 12,000 votes. I got 3,300. Even with that ass kicking, I would not trade it for a second. It was such a formative experience at 30 years old. And so I came back to it in 2025. I knew over the years that I wanted to try one more time and launched my campaign in June of 2025. And thankfully, she did retire this time. But yeah, it's pretty much been on and off 4.5 years of vying for the seat.
Amazing. Um, so with your involvement in the DSA for the past, how long did you say? About a decade?
Well, 4 years.
Great.
It'll be 5 in August.
Awesome.
Yes.
So what does it mean to you to have a Democratic Socialist Justice of the Peace in this position?
It's very important for me, comrade, right? In doing research the first time and then kind of going back to the drawing board in the years, let's say 2022 to 2025, and doing work at the legislature, engaging in advocacy, and just seeing the immense power that's held by JPs across Texas. I recognize that a democratic socialist, especially with a co-governing model of the work, could do great, impactful work in justice court. And, we'll get into this a little bit more in the interview, but the idea is to have DSA and tenants unions in the court, right, which is public and accessible, and kind of connect working class people who are navigating these incredibly stressful, really deleterious proceedings, like bouncing babies on their lap, trying to figure out how they're going to pay $5,000 in back rent in a week. Having comrades in that space and having me as a socialist on the bench, I think we can really try and build working class power here in Texas. JPs, certainly you can appeal the decisions to a higher court, but rarely is that exercised. They tend to be the court of last resort for these evictions, truancy referrals, and Class C misdemeanors and small claims that are heard in them. And yeah, I recognize that a Democratic Socialist in this autonomous court could do really good work.
Mhm. Yeah, I love the idea of building up like a presence of solidarity in the courtroom.
Mm, well
Um,
done.
yeah, I imagine that would be really impactful for families that are, yeah, dealing with the stressful situation that you're talking about. So going into a little bit of your history, you're currently serving as the Director of Education Justice with Texas Appleseed, an organization that promotes social, economic, and racial justice for all Texans by leveraging the skills and resources of volunteer lawyers, other professionals, and community partners. Um, how has your experience in this role influenced how you plan to approach truancy cases?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I'll start with a nod. It was very gratifying on February 12th to receive the Austin Chronicle endorsement in this race. And they nodded to my stated intention to bring social, racial, and economic justice to the bench, which really is just the perfect cap of this decade that I've been a lawyer. I became a lawyer in 2016, and I've been at Texas Appleseed since 2019. But to get to the heart of your question, I currently work with two other lawyers on my team, and as I mentioned in a previous answer, engage in public policy advocacy, primarily at the state capitol every odd year, but then also do direct representation of young people and their parents in school discipline referrals, as well as truancy proceedings. And in observing truancy referrals and going to various justice courts from as far east as Angelina County, which is probably about 75 miles northeast of Houston proper, to Nueces County and Corpus Christi, I really have seen that, the imperative approach of racial justice has to be a bedrock of how truancy referrals proceed in justice court, not only in Precinct 1 of Travis County, but across the state. And, I have not as much directly represented kids who are facing those truancy referrals, but have gotten a lot of ideas about how I think counsel, and that's one vision I have for the court to bring more volunteer lawyers and generally attorneys who are supporting litigants in these cases into the courtroom, but generally have seen that the judge will go through the litany of rights available to the litigants in the courtroom. One thing that really stood out to me in 2023 while I was observing justice court proceedings in Nueces County and Corpus Christi is that the judge stated that a mental health defense is available for young people, right? Like if you're dealing with the stresses of the pandemic and you have a mental health diagnosis, that can be a defense that you can argue, to say that these unexcused absences shouldn't count against me. And it was so rushed, right, that the parents and kids dealing with these stressful circumstances didn't plead the defense, right? When it felt like to me there were at least a few cases where they could have ostensibly done that. And so yeah, my whole career, right, my decade as a lawyer, my nearly 7 years at Texas Appleseed, I think have prepared me quite well to have racial justice guide me in ruling from the bench.
Amazing. So kind of expanding a bit more on that topic, Precinct 1, where you're running to be Justice of the Peace, it covers the area of Northeast Austin and the East Side down until 7th Street. And this area of Austin has a history of racist redlining policies that pushed Black and Latino residents to the east side of Interstate 35. And it's now experiencing ongoing gentrification. So, how does racial justice come into play in the justice court in that context? And do the precinct's rapidly changing demographics pose new
Mhm.
challenges for the justice court?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of doing research for both of my runs in 2022 and 2026, we recognize that because of that racist history and the city plans of just over a century ago, right? Evictions, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the highest number of evictions that occur in the Precinct 1 Justice Court of Travis County. And that's been something that I have unapologetically uplifted on the campaign trail and in written and verbal materials that, in America, you cannot divorce what's happening in 2026 from 1776. And, that racist history of, let's say, the Three-Fifths Compromise, where black men were counted as, 60% of a human being for purposes of representation, that is directly related to, the disproportionate, you know, experiences of homelessness, of poverty, of all of these ill social determinants of health that black people experience on the east side and, Latino people and other folks of color. And so, yeah, having that history in mind is going to be at the forefront of, my public presentations of how I rule from the bench. It's really this insidious point in history where during the legislative processes of 2021 to 2025, which I worked, right, increasingly, there were these pushes for critical race theory bans and to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, really just stunning that, if you say that I am suffering under discrimination, that is discriminatory, right, is the logic. And no, we're just going to unapologetically in this justice court, in this autonomous bench, say that racial justice is very important to implement and to think about how history, authentic history, is influencing the present and how we can remediate that long, terrible history in the future.
Amazing. Yeah, wow. I actually didn't know that about the Precinct 1 having the highest rate of evictions. That's very telling for, how history carries into the present day. Last question for you. How can a kind of hyper-local position, such as Justice of the Peace, how could it affect change on a larger scale?
Yeah, I was so thankful to be with comrades at Batch Kolaches, and I want to plug an election night watch party at Batch Kolaches, where we launched the campaign on Juneteenth in 2025, and we'll end it where we started at 6:30 p.m. Off of Main Road in Airport. And I'm also like a storyteller and a writer, and so I'll have these bits, in my speeches. And I said, it's like, look, y'all, we're building the party Lenin style. And then like imagine me at doors in my neighborhood talking like this. And everybody's like, we actually love this guy. But that comrade is the vision, right? I uplifted that in a chat with David Griscom of Left Reckoning during my speech on February 6th at Batch. And now, right, like we're party building. Like the Socialist Workers Party is what we're trying to build in 2026 on to 2076 and beyond. And across 2025, I was contending with this question, comrade. I went to the socialism conference put on by Haymarket Books in Chicago in July, and then to a Jacobin conference on socialism in New York City in September. And the Democratic Party question is, so pertinent, right? And I have my misgivings about technically being labeled as a Democrat. But I'm like, for these hyper local positions, like the label, you know, it is what it is, right? It's not like the end all be all. And like if you're that accountable to your local constituency and have this, again, co-governing philosophy, then the nomenclature can change down the road. But what we're trying to do and build power through these local races and empower working people to have a say over these institutions with such an immense impact on their lives. I think hyper-local races can be very important. And I think honestly, it's what socialists should be focusing on with electoral strategies in this phase of our party building.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's so important to build up the people at the local level so that when you actually have someone at, a Senate level, presidency,
Oh, yeah.
whatever, there's the infrastructure of support. Um, yeah, amazing. Thank you for answering that. That's all the questions that I have for you today. Thank you so much. This was like very elucidating. Um,
So
I'm
wonderful,
excited to vote
comrade.
for you once I
Yeah.
get out. I'm planning to vote on Friday.
So exciting. Yeah.
But yeah, everyone listening, get out to vote for Andrew by wait, early voting ends on the 27th, and
Yes,
then
February
election.
17th to the 27th, and then the big day is March 3rd.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again, comrade.
Now that we've heard from Andrew himself, the next step is for you to vote. In our small part of the world, we can make a difference. Where children can stay in their classrooms, where tenants can keep a roof over their heads, and where people are shown support and opportunity rather than given another obstacle. A victory for Andrew Hairston will be a victory for working class families. If you live in Precinct 1, get out and vote. Early voting started on February 17th and it ends on the 27th. And then election day is on March 3rd. Tell your friends and family to vote for Andrew Hairston. His name will be the second name on the primary ballot. This election could be extremely close and could be decided by a couple hundred votes. Secondly, you can join his campaign. This Saturday, February 28th, will be the final Get Out the Vote canvas before Election Day. Come knock on doors, be in community with other comrades, and support our comrade who's willing to fight for us. You can RSVP for the canvas on our calendar at austindsa.org/events. You can also donate to his campaign and stay up to date on Instagram or Facebook at Hairston for Peace. The chance to make a difference in our own community gives a chance to make a difference everywhere else, because who we are on the small scale will reflect who we become on the larger scale.